The ballroom of the Carlton estate glittered with 1,000 crystal lights, each chandelier throwing patterns of gold across the polished floor. The scent of white roses and champagne floated in the air, mixed with the chatter of guests dressed in their finest. It was the wedding of the year, and everyone knew it. Socialites, politicians, old money families, and new tech billionaires, everyone had shown up to witness the joining of two powerful families. Everyone, except Alexander Grant, didn't look like he belonged. He sat at the far end of a round table, alone. His custom-tailored black tuxedo fit him perfectly, his posture was as sharp as his reputation. Alexander was the 32-year-old CEO of Grant Innovations, the youngest billionaire in the room, and yet, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He hated weddings, not because he didn't believe in love, at least, not entirely. It was the way people looked at him when they realized he was alone. Like he was some rare, exotic animal at the zoo. A billionaire without a date. A man too busy for companionship. Someone who must be either cold or broken. The whispers reached him even here, in the corner. Why's he sitting by himself? I heard he doesn't do relationships. Maybe he's waiting for some model to show up late. Alexander sipped his champagne and ignored them. He didn't need a date to prove his worth. He didn't need to explain himself to anyone. But then, pretend you're with me. The whisper came soft and urgent at his shoulder. Before he could turn, a woman slid gracefully into the empty chair beside him, her perfume a mix of jasmine and something darker. She leaned in, her lips curving in a breathless smile for the benefit of whoever might be watching. Alexander blinked, startled. She was stunning, not in the polished, predictable way of society's daughters who filled the ballroom. Her beauty was unstudied, almost rebellious. Chestnut brown hair slipped out of an updo in loose curls that framed her face. Her gown, deep emerald satin, clung to her curves like it had been made for her. But her eyes, those green eyes carried mischief, urgency, and something else he couldn't place. "I beg your pardon," he murmured, his tone caught between amusement and curiosity. "Just go with it," she whispered, sliding her hand over his as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her touch was warm, confident, not the slightest bit hesitant. Alexander glanced around. A group of women near the dance floor were watching her with thinly veiled disdain. Ah, a rival, then. Whoever this stranger was, she had just walked into a social battlefield and was using him as her shield. Interesting. And why, Alexander said under his breath, should I pretend to be your date? Because, she said, flashing a smile so dazzling it made the women across the room bristle, you look like you could use the company. And I look like I'm about to be devoured by sharks. The honesty in her tone disarmed him. She didn't fawn over his money. She didn't stammer at his name. She didn't even seem impressed, or intimidated. For the first time all evening, Alexander felt something other than boredom. "All right," he said, his lips curving. "I'll play along." She leaned back, still holding his hand as though it had always belonged there. "Good. Then tonight, Mr. Stranger, we're the happiest couple in the room." The charade began easily. She introduced herself only as Lila, no last name offered, which struck him as deliberate. When people approached, she laughed at his dry comments, touched his arm, whispered things in his ear as if they shared secrets. To his own surprise, Alexander found himself enjoying it. With Lila beside him, the whispers stopped. No longer was he the lonely billionaire. He was a man with a radiant partner who lit up the room. But there was something else, too. Beneath the performance, there was a spark he hadn't expected. The way she looked at him, not like a man to be studied, but like someone she could read. The way her laughter wasn't forced. The way she didn't ask for a single thing from him. During dinner, she nudged him. "You've been scowling since the soup course. If you hate being here, why come?" "Obligation," Alexander admitted. "The groom's father is one of my company's largest investors. And no one could accompany you." She teased. "A man like you." He arched a brow. "A man like me, you know," she said lightly, the type who could have a date with the snap of his fingers. "Beautiful, eager, perfectly polished." "Sounds tedious," he said. She laughed, and the sound settled under his skin. When the first dance began, couples flooded the floor. Lila leaned in. "If we're going to sell this, we should probably dance." Alexander hesitated. He wasn't a man who danced often. But when she extended her hand, he took it. On the dance floor, the music wrapped around them, soft and romantic. She moved gracefully, effortlessly, and he followed, his hand steady at her back. For a moment, the ballroom disappeared. It was just her eyes on his, the warmth of her hand, the rhythm of something that felt dangerously close to real. "You're better at this than I expected," she whispered. "Are you always this forward with strangers?" he asked. Her lips curved. "Only the ones who look like they need saving." He chuckled, low in his throat. "And what about you? Who's saving you?" Her smile faltered for the first time. She looked away, just for a second, before masking it with playfulness. "Maybe I'm saving myself." The answer left a question mark hanging in his chest. Hours slipped by. Between dances, laughter, and subtle touches, Alexander realized he'd forgotten about the whispers, the investors, the obligations. He had forgotten about being alone. But as midnight approached, he noticed Lila checking her phone more often. Her gaze flicked to the exit, then back to him, as if she were torn. Finally, during dessert, she leaned close. "I should go." The words hit him harder than they should have. "Go, without even telling me who you really are." Her lips parted, her green eyes searching his. "Maybe it's better if you never know." He frowned. "Why?" "Because tonight was perfect," she whispered. "And sometimes, that's all something needs to be." Before he could reply, she kissed his cheek, soft and fleeting, then slipped away into the crowd. Alexander rose immediately, scanning the ballroom. But by the time he reached the entrance, she was gone. No emerald gown, no chestnut curls, no trace of the woman who had walked into his life and turned an empty night into something unforgettable. For the first time in years, Alexander Grant felt restless, unfinished, like the ground had shifted beneath him. He didn't know who Lila was. He didn't know why she had chosen him. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to stop until he found her. Alexander Grant didn't believe in ghosts, but that's exactly what Lila felt like. Something that appeared, shimmered, and then vanished, leaving him chasing shadows. For the next 2 weeks, he couldn't focus. He replayed her words, her laugh, the softness of her hand in his. For a man who prided himself on being logical and controlled, he hated how much space she took up in his thoughts. He tried everything. He reached out to the groom's family, discreetly asking if they knew her. He checked guest lists, photographs, security footage from the hotel entrance. Nothing. Lila had slipped through all the cracks like she had never existed. Until one night, leaving his office past midnight, he saw her again. She was standing at the edge of a quiet street, wrapped in a thin coat against the cold, arguing with someone on the phone. Her voice was low, tense. Alexander slowed his car, rolled down the window. "Need a ride, Miss Stranger?" She froze, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her eyes widened as she saw him. "You?" "Yes, me," he said, pulling to the curb. "Unless you plan on disappearing again." Her shoulders slumped, as if she'd been caught. She ended the call and slid into his passenger seat without a word. For a few minutes, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the engine. Finally, he said, "You vanished. No name, no explanation. Why?" She looked out the window, her reflection ghosting against the glass. "Because the life you live isn't one I belong to." "That's not an answer," he pressed. She turned, her green eyes flashing. "Fine. You want the truth. I wasn't supposed to be at that wedding. My cousin was invited, not me. I borrowed her dress, walked in, and the second people saw me, the claws came out. I panicked. You were alone, and I needed a shield. That's all it was." Her honesty should have cooled the fire in his chest. Instead, it only made it burn hotter. "You expect me to believe that?" "You should," she said softly. "Because I don't need anything from you, Alexander. Not your money, not your name, not your world." The way she said his name, like she had known it all along, made something twist inside him. Over the next days, their paths kept crossing. Coincidence, or something more. He ran into her at a coffee shop, saw her again at a downtown art gallery. And each time, their conversations grew longer, deeper, sharper. Lila wasn't like anyone he knew. She challenged him, called him out on his cynicism, mocked the walls he built around himself. And yet, she never asked for favors. She never tried to leverage his wealth. If anything, she pulled away whenever he tried to get closer. One evening, after hours of walking the city together, Alexander finally asked, "What are you so afraid of?" Lila stopped under a street lamp, her hair catching the glow. "That if I let you in, I'll lose myself." He stepped closer. "Or maybe you'll find yourself." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the world tilted toward him. But then she whispered, "You don't know what you're asking," and walked away. The unraveling came 3 weeks later. Alexander had just finished a board meeting when his head of security entered, holding a file. "Sir, I think you should see this. It's about the woman you've been asking us to find." Inside were photographs, records, a name, Lila Carter, 28, background in nonprofit work, no criminal record, but her brother, Daniel Carter, was a different story. Embezzlement, fraud, owed money to the very investors Alexander worked with. And worse, Lila's phone number had been traced. She had been in frequent contact with one of his corporate rivals. A sharp betrayal sliced through him. Had she been playing him this entire time? That evening, he confronted her. She was waiting outside his office, as if she had known he would come looking. "You lied," Alexander said coldly. "Or do you prefer, Lila Carter? Sister of a criminal, acquaintance of my enemies. Tell me, was I just another mark? A rich fool you could wrap around your finger?" Her face went pale. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She swallowed hard. "Yes, my brother made mistakes. He's in over his head with dangerous people. They threatened me, Alex. They said if I got close to you, if I found a way to make you vulnerable, maybe they'd let him walk free." The truth hit like a hammer. She had been forced into this. But instead of relief, Alexander felt the sting of betrayal. So every laugh, every dance, was that all part of the game? Her eyes filled with tears. "No, that part was real, too real, which is why I tried to leave that night at the wedding. I knew if I stayed, I'd only hurt you." For the first time in years, Alexander didn't know what to believe. Days turned into restless nights. Logic told him to cut her off, to protect himself and his empire. But his heart remembered her laughter, her honesty, the way she had looked at him when no one else was watching. The breaking point came when his security team uncovered something terrifying. Daniel Carter hadn't just stolen money. He had fallen in with a criminal syndicate that was now targeting Lila. She wasn't just a pawn, she was leverage. That's when Alexander knew he couldn't walk away. The climax unfolded on a rain-soaked night. Alexander arrived at the abandoned warehouse where Lila was being held. His security team was already in place, but Alexander insisted on going in himself. He had faced hostile takeovers, boardroom battles, and billion-dollar negotiations, but nothing compared to the fear of losing her. Inside, the scene was chaos. Lila was bound to a chair, her brother unconscious nearby. Men with guns circled like vultures. The leader sneered as Alexander entered. The great Alexander Grant, finally willing to get his hands dirty. Alexander's voice was ice. "Let her go. This is between your syndicate and me." The man smirked. "You think we want your money? No, we want to show the world that even Alexander Grant can bleed." The next moments blurred. A struggle, shouts, the crack of gunfire. Alexander lunged, shielding Lila with his body as his team stormed in. By the time the smoke cleared, the syndicate was in handcuffs, Daniel was alive, and Lila, shaken, but safe, was staring at him as though seeing him for the first time. "You came for me," she whispered. "Of course I did," Alexander said, his voice rough. "Because I don't care how it started. What we have, it's real. And I'm not letting it go." Her tears fell freely as she leaned into him. "Even if I break everything I touch." He pulled her closer. "Then let me be the one thing you don't." The weeks after the rescue were a blur of recovery. Daniel entered a rehabilitation program under Alexander's resources. The syndicate was dismantled by federal authorities. For the first time in years, Lila could breathe. And yet, she hesitated. One quiet evening, as they stood on Alexander's penthouse balcony overlooking the city, she whispered, "You deserve someone simple. Someone without baggage. Not me." He studied her, his hand warm against hers. "Lila, I'm a billionaire CEO. My life has never been simple. But with you, it's honest. And I'd take that over perfection any day. She searched his eyes, torn between fear and hope. So what now? Alexander smiled faintly. Now, we stop pretending. The ending wasn't fireworks and fairy tales. There was no sudden wedding, no picture-perfect happily ever after. Instead, there were slow mornings over coffee, long walks through the city, late-night arguments that ended in laughter, a billionaire who finally let someone see past his armor, and a woman who stopped running from her past long enough to imagine a future. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for Alexander Grant and Lila Carter, that was more than enough.